We are here at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture with Lawrence M. Barnes Jr., and you go by Pete, right?
Otherwise known as Pete, yes, and that leads me into a story immediately. It's a good friend of my mother's who had a son about the same time I was born, and she was looking at me and she said, "You know, Emily, your son has big ears. He looks like Peter Rabbit." And I was a junior, so I picked up the moniker Pete from a good friend of my mom's back in 1945.
Just to make the distinction.
Yeah, just to make the distinction, exactly.
But we're here with Dr. Emily Raymond is joining us, and Ren is doing the recording. So now, may I ask you where and when you were born?
June the 10th, 1945, Audrain County, in the town of Mexico, Missouri.
And
So I'm a Midwestern boy.
And what were your parents' names?
Emily Barnes, Emily Hawthorne Barnes was my mother. Hawthorne was her maiden name, and my father was Lawrence M. Barnes.
And did you have any siblings?
Two sisters, younger, Mary and Ruth. They're both deceased, but they were respectively 2 and 4 years younger than I.
I'm sorry.
Well, it happened.
So what did your parents do in Missouri?
My mother was a housewife. My father was from a family that were a big duck in a small pond. He developed real estate and built houses in his lifetime. He built about 200 actually, and he was very interested in the military. He was a Marine in World War II. So one of his subdivisions in this little small Missouri town has got streets named Quantico, Bougainville, Tripoli, and Marine Drive in it, with about 75 or 80 houses that he developed. So anyway, he did that, and he liked that, and he was his own boss for all of his life.
So what did he do in World War II, other than being a Marine?
He fought in the South Pacific as an artillery officer. I always was impressed by that, and now I find myself wishing that he were still alive because there are questions I would like to ask. I mean, for instance, I got to Vietnam. I went in a chartered 707 out of Travis Air Force Base in California, and there were no jet airplanes in 1941. It didn't even exist. So he took a ship, I think. And I've heard some stories. I think he took maybe a Holland America cruise liner that they painted dark. Anyway, took a cruise ship across. Except he didn't have a private room. He had a roommate, and but I remember one thing he said, and that was they had these freezers full of really fabulous food for their guests because the Navy just came in and took over the ship one day. And so he said they had pheasant and salmon, which was unheard of in Missouri when he was a boy. So they had really wonderful food transiting from the West Coast to the South Pacific, hoping they didn't get hit by a submarine. I'm sure they were scared to death of getting sunk, but they didn't get sunk. Anyway, he served 4 years, got out in 1945. At the rank of lieutenant colonel, and it's curiously enough, I too stayed in the military, and I retired as a commander with the same rank he is, only mine's a Navy rank, but we're both 05s. It's called officer level 05.
So you think that was a big influence?
Oh, it was yeah, heck yes, yeah. I mean, I think it was. I'd have to say that he never got over it, and I would say that I probably never will get over what I did in Vietnam. It was dangerous, for sure, and what he did was dangerous for sure in the South Pacific going in the islands. I believe he was on Guadalcanal. But anyway, and then I have 3 uncles who lived there, and they all served in World War II. So military service was in the family for sure.
So now, where did you go to high school?
I went to Mexico Senior High School. It was the only high school, the only choice I had. I didn't prep anywhere. It was there. I graduated in 1963. Yeah, I went to Westminster College. It's in Fulton, Missouri, south of there. My father went to school and my uncle went to school. Graduated from there in 1967. And the draft was pressing. I got a letter. It would have been in December of 66 saying, okay, we're going to let you stay in enough time through June of 67 to get your degree. But other than that, the Army wants to see you at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I decided that I was not going to go in the Army. One of my uncles served in the Army, but I thought I should go in the Navy, and I did. To avoid, to be perfectly frank, to avoid the Army, because that was a good way to get killed.
So you were aware of the risks of being in the Army?
I absolutely was, and I was particularly aware of the risk of the young Marines too. Those guys had a tough time. I don't, in fact, going in the Navy was just phenomenally interesting. I mean, it was a spectacular experience, and I haven't done anything as interesting since, actually. I've had jobs that made money. But that's what I was trying to do. But the Navy was tremendous. And I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but there's something about being from the Midwest and seeing the ocean that is unique and inimitable. It's fascinating. And I remember when I was at OCS at Newport, Rhode Island, when it became apparent that I was going to graduate and get commissioned, they said, okay, here's a dream sheet. And they said, what coast would you like to be on? And I thought, well, I've never seen the West Coast. I like to be on the West Coast. And if you want to be on the West Coast, what city would you like to be in? I said, gee, I've always heard about San Francisco. I think I'd like to be in San Francisco. And finally they said, what size do you want to be on, a small ship or a big ship? And I pretty much knew that I wasn't going to make the Navy a career, which turned out to not actually be true. I did make it a career, a secondary career. But I said, I think I'd like to be on an aircraft carrier. And that's exactly what I got, was an aircraft carrier in San Francisco Bay, home ported when I got aboard. It was at the Naval Shipyard at Hunters Point, San Francisco. And we actually had moorings across the bay at a place called Treasure Island in Alameda, California. And being in San Francisco in the late 60s was phenomenal. It was, for once, I was on the leading edge of something. All the rock music, you might have heard of Janis Joplin or The Doors, came out of San Francisco. And there were some famous nightclubs there. And anyway, I just thought, boy, that would be a cool place to go. And it was. It was phenomenal. Beautiful, beautiful city. The San Francisco Bay, I don't know, it's the prettiest harbor I've ever seen, at least in North America, with the exception of Pearl Harbor, which is a beautiful, beautiful harbor too, in Hawaii.
Can I interject?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm also from Missouri, and I also went to Westminster College, so this is very exciting. It's a really, really small school.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
When did you go there?
91 to 95.
And where are you from?
St. James, Missouri.
Where is St. James?
It's pretty close to Rolla, which is pretty close to Fort Leonard.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. Which you managed to avoid.
well, yeah, that's fascinating. And so where did you get your PhD?
At the University of Missouri in Columbia.
Really? Really?
Yeah.
Well, my wife said, can I come with you? I said, yeah. Well, she said, I'm not dressed. She changed her mind. But she is a reading teacher from Mizzou.
Oh, cool.
And taught phonics
Uh-huh.
for, I guess, she actually taught about 5 years all told.
Yeah.
I used to, one of the things that's turned out has been a golden thread through my life is rivers. And up in Mexico, up in Honduran County, we did not have clear streams like you have down around Rolla. The Gasconade comes to mind immediately. And, but our family used to vacation on the Gasconade just outside of Waynesboro.
Yeah.
And I learned how to read water, which played a part in my life too. But lo and behold, not only was I on the Gasconade River, I was on the Mekong River for about a year.
It's a big leap from the Gasconade to the Mekong.
How did you get to Richmond?
Through my job at VCU. I'm a history professor.
So you are just doing this as an adjunct kind of deal? This,
Yeah.
The guest curator.
The guest curator. Okay, I did hear that word guest. Yeah.
And one question I have too is, you said you were aware of the dangers of the Army and the Marines. How did you become aware of those dangers?
The boys were getting killed.
Just seeing the stories in the newspaper.
Yeah. I mean, the local boys were. As a matter of fact, there's a move as I speak to you. A young man named Howell, I think is how he pronounces his name, was a helicopter gunner and got killed. And they're going to name part of the highway back in Auburn County for him. And maybe like right now, they're doing it. Yeah, it is nice, but and I also felt like the politics were very complicated, and I knew that I didn't want to get hurt if I possibly could avoid it, and I also knew that I thought I was smarter than some of the young men I was with, and I might be able to protect them while we were doing what we were doing on the stab boats in country in Vietnam. And it turned out to be true. Nobody got hurt in my group. Close, but.
Yeah. That's great.
Did you and your father ever discuss the draft or what you were going to do?
My father was a big believer in the draft, and it was a big deal in World War II. And it's, you hear the term, those are the breaks in naval air. Well, he said, son, you're going to get drafted. And here, as a Marine, he said, I recommend that you stay out of the Marine Corps. And I recommend you stay out of the Army because they are death traps. You could go in and get shot easily and just be over. So it was recommended to me, a guy who very much believed in the draft, and he believed. My guess is we saw it the same way, and I don't know how it would have been if I had been an anti-war activist. And what's the word you use? I can't think of what it's called. Demonstrator. If I'd have been like at Wayne State and various things that happened back in those days, I don't know how it would have worked out between the two of us had I not done it. But well, let me say this: I had a very liberal aunt named Marjorie Barnes, who offered to finance me to go to Canada and completely avoid the draft. He says, I'll just support you for as long as it takes. You can go up there and do what you want, but I'll provide you with money every month as long as you need it. I turned it down. And I am.
Is that your father's sister? Or
Yep, my father's sister. Yep. She that was when she went to school when the family had money. My oldest uncle went to Amherst and she went to Smith College, which was a big deal from Missouri.
Yeah.
And you had to take the train to get to Northampton, Mass. And anyway, then my father and I went to Westminster. I had an uncle who went to Westminster because it was close, it was handy, and it was reasonably priced. So, and it was good enough to get me in OCS, Officer Candidate School, at Newport, Rhode Island.
Was there any movements in the college against the war?
No. But there also was a lot of my buddies were pre-med guys, and they were looking to cut deals with medical schools, a thing called the Berry Plan, you were allowed to complete medical school. And I think if you did that, you would not be drafted, and you would be allowed to finish medical school, finish your residency, but you would owe the Navy 7 years, I think, after you were through with the training, because they were looking for docs. But so anyway, there were people who were working to do that.
As a way to delay it.
Yeah, as a way, yeah. If it's delayed, it's denied. And so if they delayed it, they might very well succeed in not having anything to do with the military, which is exactly how it turned out. I saw people rebelling against the military on TV. I mean, they're my exact contemporaries. But I never had any problem with it, with one exception. I went to Officer Candidate School August 19th of '67 and got out December 15th of '67, just before Christmas. And we had our first break at Officer Candidate School around Thanksgiving. So a buddy and I went to Boston. We'd never seen Boston. And they would not let us wear civilian clothes. We had to wear our service dress blues, which is the standard Navy uniform. And I was walking in the Boston Commons, where they have the swan boats. And anyway, we were walking down the street, and I felt something on my right shoulder. Somebody passed me, and somebody spit on me. And I didn't realize it till I got away from him. I wouldn't have done anything anyway. I think I took a handkerchief out and cleaned it off and kept on going. That was that. But that's as close as I ever came to having anybody
Protest against.
Yeah, protest against me. Yeah, that's right.
Did you tell your dad about your aunt's offer?
Oh, yeah.
What did he have to say about it?
He, I think, was infuriated by it. But he also understood it, and he understood her point of view. She thought that we were making a hell of a mistake as a country. And it turns out she might very well have been right. But it wasn't in the cards for me to be a draft dodger. And the safest way to deal with the military is as a commissioned officer. Your life is immeasurably better if you're an officer. It's unfair, as a matter of fact. If you're a commissioned officer, it's kind of assumed that you might not have any sense, but you do have some brain power. And the reverse is true if you're an enlisted man. You couldn't become an officer, and there was a question of your intelligence at a higher level. Not to say that the officers were any great shakes, but anyway, the living was better, the food was better, everything was better as an officer. And if you could become a commissioned officer in any of the services, your life would be, you're going to make more money. It's totally superior. And I remember back in those days, hell, I didn't have anything I wanted to do. I thought, my God, all I've done is go to school until I was 22, and I was sick of it. A job looked to me like it was more time back in the box. Yes, you were getting paid for it, but it was the same as school in some respects. And let me tell you, a trip on an aircraft carrier, I did the classic South Pacific cruise, San Francisco to Pearl Harbor, to Yokosuka in Japan, to Subic Bay in the Philippines, Singapore, all over that part of the world. And it was mind-boggling. It was incredible. It was quite a trip. And I, for the first time in my life, did everything pretty much right during my initial time in the Navy. I qualified to run the Hancock, to drive it. I was an OOD, an officer at the deck underway. And with the exception of the captain, I was in charge of the whole damn thing. If I said left standard rudder, this huge ship, it would come to the left. You could see it tilt over, something 900 feet long that would go 35 miles an hour at top speed. Oh, it was impressive. In a day, you could be nearly 300 miles from where you were the day before. And in 10 days, you were halfway around the world. And in navigating a huge ship like that, you can go in straight lines. There's no stoplights. There's no slowing down. You can just go. And that's exactly what we did.
Well, let me go back to San Francisco.
Sure.
You were very interested in the music.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of the counterculture. But you said you had the experience in Boston, but you never had any experience in San Francisco that was...
Well, I made some accommodations. I didn't go out in uniform. When I was off of the ship, I wore my civilian clothes, and other than the fact that I had short hair, which, like now, I was looking at some young man doing the TV news on Channel 6 here in Richmond, and his hair was almost buzz cut. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Well, there were guys who having hair was a big deal. The musical hair, what was going on. I'm sorry, what was the question?
So I think you're saying that you were in civilian clothes, but the
Oh, yeah.
one thing that would have given you away was your
That's
hair.
right. I wasn't going out and making a statement with my clothes that I was in the Navy. And people looking at me, I said, well, he's got closely cut hair. And he might be in the military, but I never had any problem with it. And there was one area in San Francisco that was very famous for just wild goings on in general, Haight-Ashbury. And I went to Haight a lot, to go to a bar, to hear music, or just to hang out. And it was at a beautiful place called, close to a place called Golden Gate Park in Speedway Meadows. Was a place that I like to go. And in those days, I didn't have a car. So I would go with somebody because the ship was down on the water in San Francisco Bay. And it would take maybe 30 minutes to get to where we were going. So I was always, since I didn't have a car, I was going with somebody. And so there was always one or two of us around. I didn't go out and lone wolf it.
So there was safety in numbers.
Hell yes, for sure. And usually I was with 2 or 3 other people. And it's not that we were looking for trouble, but we were looking out for one another. So.
Did you see any bands that were notable at the time, or?
I saw Janis Joplin, and I saw Frank Sinatra when we went over to the Oakland side of the bay. There was a thing called Special Services that the ship ran, and you could go to Special Services and get free tickets to concerts and to they had full the Oakland Athletics, and anyway, the Oakland Raiders. You could go see professional sports for nothing, just your time. And so I did that a lot.
It sounds like a really nice place to be stationed.
Oh, it was
One of the best.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know how you'd improve on it. The San Francisco was stunningly beautiful. Oh, I heard Tony Bennett sing San Francisco.
When you said, I was thinking about Tony Bennett.
Yeah. I heard Tony Bennett. I was 10 feet from him. There was an area called North Beach, which was famous for its strippers. And there was a very famous one named Carol Dota, who was built when bricks were cheap. And Carol put herself on display every hour at North Beach. and there were neat bars around there. The whole area was, I mean, what was going on in New York was important, or maybe Washington DC even, but it was not as good as San Francisco, because neither were as stunningly beautiful. San Francisco Bay, have you ever seen San Francisco Bay? I mean, it's
the most beautiful place.
yeah, it is a beautiful, beautiful place. It really is. It's phenomenal. I'm a member of a club there, the Marine, to this day, and I always have a reason to go to San Francisco. And if I have a reason to, I try and get there once every couple of years. Some of the things kind of change, but the basic beauty, well, Muir Woods on the north side of it is spectacular above us, Tiburon and Sausalito. Lovely. Have you been there? Yeah. So
how long did you spend in San Francisco before the ship left to go to?
we were in a workup phase, and I'd say about 6 months. We were coming out of a yard phase for the ship itself, and we did something called carrier qualifications, car quals, and so we did that out beyond the Farallon Islands, which are at the mouth of San Francisco Bay, which also is the biggest collection of white sharks in the world off of there. Anyway, about 6 months of that, and then we were going to, the Navy calls it deploy, and we were on our way to head to Yankee Station in the South China Sea. So I did that. I was aboard Hancock until the summer of 1969.
And what would you say an average day on the Hancock? What in your job duty of making the ship go?
I had two jobs. I was a watchstander, which is what made the ship go, as were a lot of other. I was an ensign, which is the lowest level, an O1 officer. And I decided, I was telling you that I did things right. I was kind of the first guy in my group to become an OOD underway. And it turns out that that it was beneficial to me, and I think I could have probably made, just on the strength of that alone, the Navy a career, which I ended up doing kind of anyway. This is not a secret. On the advice of my father, he said, this is all when I was done with Vietnam, he said, if you can stand it, I would stay in the Navy Reserves. So I said, okay, and I did it, basically. It took 17 more years, but I did 26 years in the Navy, all told. Mm-hmm. I had a break in it, but I am a retired Navy officer. And it makes a big deal because of the medical coverage I get to this day. It's called TRICARE for Life. It's a huge deal. It's picked up gratis for me and for my wife. And I get paid. Once I hit 60, which was now 18 years ago, that's hard to believe, I began to get paid again. There was an area where I did not get paid, and I forget what it's called, a gray area. For about 10 years, between 50 and 60, I was not going to make the next rank, and so the Navy says goodbye, which and it's up and out is the system, and it's okay. It allows you to go through it and allows you to get the time in. And so I got this thing called an NOE, a Notice of Eligibility letter, from the Bureau of Naval Personnel saying you have qualified for ... benefits, and then that was the end of it. And they came through like a champion. The taxpayers send me a check every month, like clockwork. And what it looks like is, if I can get my pocket unbuttoned here, it looks like this. Here is an ID that I carry, and that will get me in any base in the world. And it also On the back side, I think it says something about
So you have, oh,
medical coverage, I forget
but
what
we
it's.
don't need to show that.
No, yeah, I mean, anyway, this is, that is a military ID. It is nice.
But to go back to the Hancock and what you did during that time period,
Mhm.
from the day to day, what was it like from when you woke up?
I didn't answer your question.
Did you work night shifts or did you work day shifts?
We worked a rotating shift that was 4 hours long. When we were on the bridge, we were up there for 4 hours, with the exception of the evening meal where you were up there for 2 hours only. It was called the dog watch. A watch ran from 4 to 6 and 6 to 8. Other than that, it was 4-hour watches, and they rotated around the clock. The ones that I hated the worst were the midnight to 4 a.m. watches, because I really couldn't get any sleep before the midnight watch. So you'd end up kind of staggering off the bridge at 03:45 in the morning, and getting about 4 hours sleep, because you were expected to work in your desk job. And I was a division officer in the weapons division, and we were charged with taking aboard and stowing 500-pound bombs, which we bombed the living hell out of Vietnam with. But anyway, so I was a division officer and a watchstander, and that was considered plenty of work to do.
So how long was your division officer desk job? How many hours did you do that in a day?
Well, this is the good and the bad of a ship. I spent just a lot of time there. It was a place to go, and it was kind of an 8-hour day, but the watch standing was on top of it.
Yeah.
So we worked a lot of days. I'd say that we were 12 hours. And that's the bad thing with the ship. You can't get away. If you get crossways with somebody or you have a personality conflict, the best you can do is hope that in the worst case, you'd be with that person for 3 years. But usually the timing of things was such that they were gone within a year. And an aircraft carrier is big enough where you could get away. Whereas if I was on a destroyer, hell, there was no respite. And they're not really relevant to this, but I saw where there were personality conflicts, where a junior officer got crossways with his superior. And it's really tough to deal with that because of the fact that you were so damn close. And you are close. But the days, like if you were standing watches on the bridge, I was right next to the captain of the ship many times and for most of the time. And the captain of the ship was the most senior officer there. And so the guys who might hassle you would never dream of talking to you while you were standing a bridge watch, for fear that they might pick up a phone, and lo and behold, there's the captain saying, "What in the hell are you doing calling up here when we're running flight operations here?" Which I saw it happen one time, and the guy never called again. There was this a Commander Conklin whom I didn't care for at all, and I particularly did not like what he was doing to some contemporaries of mine. And for some reason, he called the bridge to talk to me, which was stupid. And I said, "Captain, here's Commander Conklin." And I handed him the phone. Oh, Conklin never did that again, and hated me for that. But he couldn't affect me. He just, he knew that I'd gotten the better of him.
Yeah.
And anyway, there was a thing called a POD, a plan of the day, which put what was going on the ship, what the flight operations were, who was standing watches, most importantly for me. And it was published every day. by a guy who was a little senior to me. He worked in the navigation department and operations department. But every day there's a plan of the day, and that's what our life was based on that.
Did you get any when was your downtime, or was it when you're on the boat, it's just?
Well, the other time is you could sleep, and initially I was in what was called the JO bunk room. There were 28 ensigns up in the forecastle of the aircraft carrier. And then it lasted about a year. And then I qualified for a small, but with a roommate, but I had a small cabin, which was that suddenly then you really could get away. And that was one of the differences. There were no enlisted guys that had cabins. They didn't have it, but I had a cabin up on the flaring bow of a carrier, and we had quite a bit of room. We had a sink in it, and a desk and table, and it was very civilized, actually.
That must have improved your life.
Oh, yeah, quite a lot. You could write letters there. I could fill out reports, do what I had to do. And then, of course, the food was really good. And there was basically a never-ending supply of food. The only time we ate together, which was every night at 6 o'clock, all the officers who were not on duty sat down for dinner. And it was lovely. We had white linen tablecloths. We had Filipinos who got U.S. citizenship, and they were basically stewards' mates who prepared the food, served the food. And we had, if this was a coffee can, a coffee container, there'd be a big handle right here. So they didn't do this, they reached in and turned it sideways when they were pouring coffee. And we had white linen tablecloths with a sterling silver napkin rings in the officers' mess. So I mean, it was pretty nice.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Do you remember any holidays? Celebrating any holidays?
Holidays were celebrated, and it was called holiday routine. I haven't thought about this in a long time, but holiday routine, everybody basically would not work, with the exception of a bare minimum. And sometimes we would schedule these holiday routines when we were in port. And when we were in port, there were all the things that a Navy port has: tattoos, women, bars. It was no holds barred.
You had to blow off a lot of steam.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Did you have any visitors, entertainers, or anyone come to the Hancock when you were on board?
Did indeed. We had the best of all. Had the Bob Hope Show
Oh, awesome.
come aboard. It was awesome. It was. We had this, what the hell was? We had a band. Les Brown and his band of renown were there. It was a full orchestra. And Margaret was in the Gold Diggers, which is about 20 nubile 20-year-olds, gals, and they put on a hell of a show. The aircraft carrier has a flight deck, which is exposed to the elements, but below it is a thing called a hangar deck, where the aircraft are stored when they're not flying. Well, we cleaned that out and raised this elevator up about 10 feet and made it a stage. And the Bob Hope Show was produced aboard the Hancock for all hands. And it was a hell of a show. It was tremendous. I'd never seen anything like it. Yep, yeah, we had the Bob Hope Show come aboard. And Margaret was flown aboard in a helicopter. And who else was there? Oh, there was a famous professional football player named Roosevelt Greer, but he was a singer. Yeah. And so he performed with the Gold Diggers. I mean, they had an hour show, and it was the best I'd ever seen.
Were you at port or were you at sea?
At sea. Then one thing else sticks in my mind is I was at Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base in South Vietnam. I was going somewhere, and the Sydney Symphony was coming through on a USO tour, and they had a vocalist who sang some songs from South Pacific light musicals, spectacular, just very, very interesting. And the quality of the voicing was world class, and you got to hear that occasionally. And then there was a fellow who was a sleight of hand artist, a magician, and I ran into him at a little base when I was in Vietnam, and he said, "Do you like card tricks?" I said, "Sure." And he was practicing anyway, and so he had me do various things when he handed cards out, and I got to see him get ready to go for a show for children that evening in the Mekong Delta. So there was all kinds of stuff like that going on.
To help entertain you.
Yeah, right. And you were left to your own devices. Sometimes there would be tours. Like Hong Kong was a fabulous place, and you would charter or rent a car and take trips around all of Hong Kong Island in Kowloon, which it was a Portuguese place, I think. Anyway, it was expected that you would do things and go see things, and we did. And it was made readily accessible to us.
As you made it closer and closer to Vietnam, did the mood change on the boat, or was it always kind of where?
If you were on an aircraft carrier, the closest we got to Vietnam was you could see it over the horizon. We stayed far enough off that where we couldn't be shot by their artillery. So we basically were on a cruise ship.
You always felt like you were.
Oh, I felt like the worst thing you could do is fall over the side. It was utterly safe. I mean, the worst thing you could probably do is hit another ship. And we worked really hard to not do that because they're so big and powerful. And you had 3,000 people depending on you not to screw it up.
Yeah.
Did you talk any with the pilots who were actually flying over Vietnam?
All the time. The Hancock was an Essex-class carrier, and one of the things that distinguished it is that all of the officers ate together. So we were around aviators all the time. Bigger ones, carriers, they had separate feeding, they called it messing facilities. And I thought that really it wasn't as good. There was a distinct community of aviators called the Brown Shoes, and the ship's company, which I was, were called the Black Shoes. And life was better for the aviators. And the Black Shoe guys, the ship's company, were there to do nothing else but get that ship so there was 30 knots coming down the flight deck and they could fire the jets off. That was our job, and those guys' job was to fly the jets. And I must say I was always jealous of them. I thought not only did they get to fly these fabulous airplanes, they got paid flight pay. We did not get flight pay. The messing was like there'd be a guy sitting in a jumpsuit called dirty shirts. But they came to the evening meal, and so I knew a lot of aviators, and the ship's company guys, because we worked together, generally ate together, but not always.
Was there any feelings about? Because I know that in July of 1968, Admiral John McCain becomes the head of the the CI and CPAC, I can't remember what that acronym is for, but like the, you know, he's the head of the fleet. And so, and his son is a
His-
POW, and then
That is
Galante-
exactly right.
And then Paul Galante was on the Hancock prior to you being there. But, you know, is there any feeling about aviators and POWs and John McCain, you know, father being the head of the Admiral, is that creating any kind of atmosphere of concern or, you know, can't lose it?
That's a tough question to answer, but the answer is the McCain family is nobility in the Navy. And they have 3 generations of admirals. John McCain, the senator, was not an admiral. And this is particularly amusing to me. Paul Galante is my neighbor, or was until he moved to Westminster, Canterbury about 2 years ago. But I would see Paul every Sunday walking to church at the First Presbyterian Church. I live within a half a block of the First Pres between Grove and Cary. And he lived over on Clark. And anyway, in the back way to go to church was right in front of my house. And I knew Phyllis before she died, his wife, really, really well. When we spoke a lot, we were friends. And Galante was lost off of the Hancock. I think I'm right about that. And so I had a 68 Firebird. My wife's had a 68 Firebird, and on there was a thing that said NAS Alameda. And Galante spotted that. And then we established the fact that we were on the same ship. But I was there just after he got shot down. And I saw his picture on a bulletin board saying this guy's a POW, from best we can tell. Fine people, utterly unassailable in terms of quality.
And it takes so much strength.
I can't believe that he survived that. And McCain even more. And McCain had, if I got my facts right, he had an offer from Ho Chi Minh just to be released immediately once he found that he had, in fact, had John McCain's son as a POW, and he turned it down and stayed there until the very bitter end. But God damn.
Injuries too.
What?
He also had a lot.
Oh yeah, you can see it in his right arm. He's got a strange motion that he has to make.
Yeah. Well, since the Hancock was in charge of, well, supporting planes that were dropping bombs,
Mm-hmm.
did you all talk very much about sort of the politics of the bombing, the graduated pressure, the pauses?
No.
That sort of thing?
We knew that Kissinger was in Paris. We would get news, a thing called Stars and Stripes magazine, which was flown aboard. Although, and we knew there was all kinds of protesting going on. I saw it 2 ways. When I was on the aircraft carrier, it didn't make any difference to me. I was unaffected by it. When I was in the Mekong Delta, it made a huge difference, and we had our lives on the line when we were running the Strike Assault Boats. That was truly dangerous. And I must say, I felt like that I had, in terms of my life experience, even the score with the aviators, because I was right down there on the ground, looking the Viet Cong in the eye, mostly at night. Politically, I was removed from everything on the carrier. I was pretty much untouched, I would say. I mean, I knew what was going on. I knew about Kent State. I knew about negotiations in Paris, which I mentioned earlier. And we were getting close. So in 1970, which was the year that I spent in country in Vietnam, the war was, there were hints of winding down, but there was enough stuff going on with the North Vietnamese that we were very busy being in country on small boats.
How did you keep in touch with your family when you were on the Hancock?
Letters, and I was in the process of getting married, and that was done with reel-to-reel tapes, like, you know, who's going to be the best man, where are we going to do this and that, and so those details could be handled, but nothing like having a cell phone. You know, I mean, they didn't exist.
So you mailed the reel-to-reel tapes back and forth
Yep.
to each other?
Yep.
And how did you meet your wife? Where did you meet her? And then
I met her in kindergarten, as a matter of fact. Yep. Yep.
And then when did you ask her to marry you?
I was married in '69, so it would have been in late '68.
And okay, so you go to OCS in '67.
Yeah.
And then you're deployed in January of '68. You go to the Gulf of.
We make a South Pacific cruise, 68, 69.
So you get married somewhere in there?
In 69, April 4th, 69.
So you
Where
were.
was your wife? Was she in Missouri all this time, or
Uh-huh.
did she move with you?
She was teaching school.
Okay.
So did you come? Were you on leave when you got married?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
She could have come to Hong Kong. I don't.
Yeah, we got married in Mexico, Missouri.
Was it hard to arrange leave, or?
No, it was easily done. That was the beauty of being with a big ship. There's always somebody to cover you, and it was not a problem. And I can remember during holidays, there were ways to work the leave, and there were a lot of bachelor officers said, "Hey, Bill, you know, just go ahead and I'll just take your watch for you, and you know, you can have Thanksgiving at home." And that was done a lot.
How many days were you able to get off to go back?
I think I was maybe gone 10 days.
And then what was the process of getting off the boat? Did you have to wait till you got to a port and then?
Yes. However, I was in a couple of weddings. I was the best man. I've been a best man 5 times. I'm pleased about that. But anyway, one of the times I went off on the COD, carry on board delivery. I actually flew off the aircraft carrier on it. And I had to get myself down to the Los Angeles area, down to Pomona, California. And so one time I flew off the carrier as it was coming into port, actually, but anyway, it allowed me to get over to Oakland and catch a commercial flight down to Pomona. Anyway, I made all the places that I had to be.
Did your wife have any opinion about your service? Was she like, I'm gonna be a military spouse, and that was something she agreed to? Or?
I think she enjoyed it, basically, but because she and I were the same in that we really had never been anywhere. But we weren't, we didn't come to town on a load of watermelons either. We weren't.
You were educated.
Yeah, we were educated, but we were pretty parochial, really. Because of where the family had gone to school, I knew that Harvard was a good school. I also knew that I couldn't get in. So we were aware of what was going on. Go back to your question again, refresh me.
Just, how your wife felt about you being in the service.
Oh, I wish she'd have come. She could answer the question herself. I mean,
And
I think she enjoyed it.
But
It-
what about when you changed you were on the aircraft carrier, which was very removed from direct conflict. You were supporting people that were flying into the conflict,
Right.
to the riverboats that were very, very much ensconced in the war. And that, I mean, you had to make a choice to change your service.
I did. I decided that doing another South Pacific cruise was not, I'd rather do something different. And so then I put in for and got orders to swift boats, the boats that Senator Kerry was so famous and controversially famous for serving aboard, and went to a school in Vallejo, California called NIOTS, Naval Inshore Operations Training Center, in the fall of 1969 to get training on small combatant boats. We had instructions from the Marines on what to do if we got blown off our boats, how to set up perimeter, how to communicate, try and get ourselves out of the fix we were in if we got in a fix. And we received that training. I received a modicum of Vietnamese language training. I went to Vietnam on December the 23rd of 1969, but because of the international dateline, Sunday in San Francisco, Monday in Manila is how the jingle goes. I actually got to Vietnam on Christmas Eve, 1969, and was in country until November of 1970. So almost a year, not quite.
Did you have any family at that point with your
No.
wife, or was it just her?
She stayed at home and taught.
Okay, but you hadn't had any children.
No.
Is that when she got you the knife?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. This knife was, I thought, I admired how it was built. And I thought, if I'm going to wear it, if I ever have to get in a situation where I need a knife, which I hope would never happen, that I would have one. Notice how thick this thing is.
Yeah.
This is a very small knife that Randall made. They actually made a combat knife that was about this long. I didn't know it at the time, that they had such a thing. But I knew that Randall was quite good. And
You said the maker is Bo?
Bo Randall, right. It says on this, it says Randall, Orlando, Florida. I think it says Orlando. See if you can read it.
It does say Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
correct.
Anyway,
So if you're from Missouri and how did you find this knife in Orlando?
it was in a fabulous sporting goods shop in San Francisco called Abercrombie Fitch. And so Abercrombie Fitch, I got the knife from Abercrombie. And this actually is the second knife that I had. This is called a bird knife. It's for bird and trout. It's for filleting meat off of birds and trout. And it's got this exact same knife, only the blade was about a half inch shorter. And I wrote Abercrombie and said, I need this. This is going to be a backup combat knife. And they said, we got one here with a little longer blade. We'll send it to you. So they sent me this one, and I sent the other one back.
And then you always had it on you when you were on the boat.
Yeah, and other times I didn't, but it was around. If I thought I needed a knife for some reason, if I was doing a night waterborne ambush, God forbid, and it went awry and we got involved in hand-to-hand combat, I wanted to have something that I could use that wouldn't break.
Did it have that handle at the time?
It's exactly as you see it. This is the one that I took.
And the case?
The case, yep. Yeah,
It's in such good condition.
And you said it's a custom-made handle.
The whole knife is custom made.
Okay.
Every bit of it is. It's made by a knife maker down in Orlando. And the back side here, it says Randall Made Knives, Orlando, Florida, on the sheath. I'd forgotten that, but that's. And as an aside, I thought it was such a magnificent piece of work. There's a guy named Rick Bowles down in Chesapeake, Virginia, who does scrimshaw work on the horn or an ivory inlay. And he is perhaps the finest scrimshander in the world. Anyway, I've got 9 other Randall knives that I've collected over my lifetime. But this one is far and away the simplest, most basic knife. The other ones were too fancy, too pretty to use, actually. And they've never really been sharpened properly. This one is sharpened properly. Anyway, my knife.
And you never had to use it?
No, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Not as a last-ditch protection. We had lots of guns on the stab boats, and full-blown machine guns. And we had, depending on the setup, as many as 6. And so there were some situations where we could shoot 2 at one time, which occasionally happened.
What was the purpose of the Swift boats? Were they looking for, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, just go ahead with that.
The Swift boat, and watch the acronyms here because I was on a stab boat. A Swift boat was 50 feet long and was meant to go out in the South China Sea, but close to shore, and check sampans and small boats. The Swift boat, and I had orders to become an OIC officer in charge of a Swift boat. But when we got to Vallejo, to this school, NIOTS, we were told, there were 4 of us, Lieutenant JGs at that time, this is the 2nd level of officer, that we had a change of orders and we were not going to be on Swift boats, we were going to be on stab boats, Strike Assault Boats. And we said, what in the hell is a Strike Assault Boat? And then we looked at some messaging and we could see that they were possibly made so that they could be lifted by helicopters and put in areas where there had never been a U.S. presence. And we thought, what the hell? That sounds super dangerous to us. And I have got an official Navy photograph of the stab boat here. Yeah, that's it. And I'll see if I can show you the hooks on it where all right. If you look, it's hard to see, but right below my finger, there is a piece of metal with a hole in it coming up in the air. There was another one on the other side called pad eyes, and there's one up here which can't be seen, but it was so you could triangularly hook up these big cables and just lift it straight up out of the water with a Chinook helicopter. You can see the 2 stern ones on this boat. Thank God they were never used for that purpose. They were only used to onload and offload the boats when we were bringing them to and from the United States to South Vietnam. The one on the bow is, I can't see it, but I know it's there because the ones in the rear are there.
Mm-hmm. Were you allowed to tell your family what you were doing since you didn't even know you were doing it?
We said it was pretty dangerous. You know, we didn't want to scare them. There were 4 guys killed doing it. The truth of the matter was we were not too sure what we were going to be doing. And I can remember sitting around over a beer saying, you know, I wonder who thought this up, because it was kind of like a Rube Goldberg. Here, I just spotted it. You see what appears to be a hole?
Yeah, uh-huh.
That's the one up in the bow.
Okay, so it's like,
Yeah, that's the one you can hook up a big, huge pad eye to it. And you can lift, these things weighed 10,000 pounds. So it required a lot of power to lift them straight up.
That's why you needed a Chinook.
Yeah, I needed a Chinook, yeah, that's right. Never did it, but that's what it would have, I think maybe somebody tested them somewhere with a Chinook.
I feel like I saw a photo online of one hooked up.
Yep, you did. That was being prepared to transship back. It was going aboard an LST, a landing ship tank. Could haul all 20 at one time. We took 20 boats in country. And halfway through the tour, I was made commanding officer of 10 boats. I was commanding officer Stab Div 202. And a running mate of mine, Dan Gorman, Naval Academy graduate, was the commanding officer of 10 boats, Stab Div 201.
So, and you, when the boats were, you would go out for your patrols, but
Right.
then you would go back to a larger ship that would help allow you to refuel and,
It varied, depending on where we were. Sometimes we were around bases. And towards the end of my tour, I was around a base called Na Bay, and that provided berthing and chow for the officers and men. There were other times when we were out remotely. This would have been on the Grand Canal, this picture taken right here. And we would just spend 3 nights out. These boats, one of the things that made them good was that there was no cabin up here. So when we went in next to the bank, like we're in the middle of in the plain of reeds here in a rice paddy, you couldn't even see the boat if you were over here a quarter mile away. We could even take these antennas, we could rotate the antennas flat so you couldn't see them. But it also meant that we spent the night out in the rain many times. Some guys would rig, depending on how dangerous it was, ponchos up, but it became fruitless if it was a downpour. And in this area, it was called monsoon, and the rain was tremendous, and we just got wet. There was all kinds of even though it looks like the boat's really low in the water, it would drain. It was self-draining. This area, this cockpit area in here, where there were 4 guys at all times, because these boats were 24 feet long, 10 feet wide, and immensely powerful. And for everybody who was a nascent hot rodder, it was cat's ass. It was cool to be around such a thing. This picture right here is really kind of overly dramatic. When the boat was really going fast, the bow came down until the only thing in the water was the stern. And these engines were 427 Chevrolet racing engines that were used in Corvettes of the day. They were, I was telling you the other day that if you were going along like this, we were probably going about 500 RPM, and you couldn't even hear the boats because they were so well insulated for sound. But if you wanted to get out of there for some reason, like you were going to get overwhelmed by the Viet Cong, you misjudged the tactical situation, you put the power on. What's going on here is this boat is going over the wake of the photographer's boat. So it's taken off and it's coming like this on its way to doing this, called planing. So the power The engines are at this point are running about 3,000 RPM, and you can feel this tremendous power surge and speed surge in the boat. Then they would turn 6,000 RPM, so you had half power left at this situation right here. So they would really haul.
So you could get away from the enemy really
Yeah,
fast.
yes. I will tell you a story. We were I was out on an ambush site, and I realized that we had been compromised. And somebody was setting up to shoot a bunch of rockets into us and kill us. So I ordered that we would break the ambush, and we were in kind of a jungly area, and we ran to an area that looked like this. Only it was about 2 a.m. And we got out where we could see and know that we were totally safe. And I said, does anybody have anything cold to drink? And because I was really spooked. I could feel the adrenaline in my body. I thought, God damn, that's close. As an example, have you ever, when you've been driving your car, been going somewhere, glanced down and kept your attention just a little longer than you should have, and looked back up and Jesus Christ, there's a stop sign coming up on, and you slam the brakes on because, well, that's the kind of jolt you get when you realize that you've lost a tactical situation. So anyway, we lost a tactical situation. I ordered us to get the hell out of there. We got out at 2 a.m. And anyway, I said, who's got something to drink? And one of the guys said, I've got some apple juice on ice. I said, break it out. Anyway, so we had our little sharpshooters things to open cans with. And I will never forget how good that cold apple juice tasted because I was really frightened.
It's like your blood sugar was off. You needed something.
Oh, well, we were dehydrated and we were scared. And we were scared because we knew that we had lost tactical command of the situation. And the only way, I mean, this was the next thing would have been we would have been attacked. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, how that would have turned out.
Did the boats often travel together, or were you apart from?
That's a very good question. We always traveled with 2 boats. There was a time when there were other boats called PBRs, patrol boat rivers, which were 31 feet long. So they were not as long as a Swift, but 10 feet longer than we were, roughly. And they had a cabin on them, actually. What was I going to say?
Boats traveling together.
Oh, yeah. They would go out and set up on the bank of a canal like this one, just set on one side. Well, what happened is the VC would crawl and try and get a rocket propelled grenade on you, call it RPG, and shoot you. And however, if there were a boat right behind you, your buddy, impossible. And so we dispensed with the idea of the lone wolf. They always went in a pair. And if this was a canal and there was a boat here and a boat here looking off, each was protecting the other's stern so nobody could swim up to you, which they did. They tried to do that, swimmers, or in any way ambush you. You protected one another. And you could also protect your own spot too. So you protected your sterns and your bows at the same time. And we always went with 2, or 4, or 6, or 8, or 10, but in units of 2. And we never lost anybody when we did that either. And we were not trying to be heroes. We were trying to do the job, which was to stop rice going from South Vietnam to North Vietnam and ammunition from going from north to south. We were interdicting along this canal that came out of Saigon, called the Grand Canal, to the west, out to the Mekong River. And it was 100 miles long, I think.
So it was like another highway, like,
Yeah, yeah, well,
for them to train.
yeah, for the people who live there, for the poor devils who, I mean, they had to, the people who live there, the indigenous people, had to keep peace with us at night, and during the daytime, that they're the Viet Cong sympathizers. So they were in a hell of a position. Damned if you do and damned if you don't. We call, the term was stood down. Unless we were running a medical program for the people, and we did that a lot, kind of a hearts and minds thing. We would give them basic, well, we had a doctor with us, actually, we had an MD. But we would give them basic medication. Ivory soap was a big thing because it meant you could at least get partially clean. A lot of the people had bad skin sores. And we had medications that we could give, injections, penicillin, what you name it. We gave it away.
So part of the job was to interact.
Oh, yeah, very definitely. Yes,
So it wasn't just like you were this fortified boat and you were just patrolling the Grand Canal. You were actually like.
Yeah, well, we had elements of kindness. It was hearts and minds, I think, were the words that were used. I think it partially worked because the things that we had were otherwise not available, like the medicines. God, you get somebody with a bad tooth. We had dentists. We'd send them out with a bunch of guards, and they would go out and pull teeth, or do fillings, or whatever had to be done to these poor devils. We had all the benefits. We were the richest nation on earth, and still are. And so if somebody tangles with us, we have all these things we can use. We don't always win, but we have all the tools.
But were there, I assume that there are boats on the canal that are just people that are going about their day trying to do things, but is the North Vietnamese military, do they have anything
They
anywhere
had
compared?
nothing like this. They had I cannot think of the name, but anyway, they had wooden boats, and most of them were. They had outriggers on them to stabilize them, but they were hauling small cargo, and they had some bigger boats that I guess you could haul as much as a tractor on. But there were these canals all over the Mekong Delta, hundreds of miles of canals. And that's how the people would get food, and they'd also sell food. But these boats in the day they cost $1 million a piece. Well, that's more than the whole county had in terms of ability to get funds to get such. No, I mean the only thing that was faster than these boats were Huey helicopters. These boats were fast and they were powerful and they were not to be messed with. And they realized that immediately that they were not stupid people by a long shot. This was something to stay away from.
But how did you tell the difference between friend or foe?
If they shot at us. That did it every time. We used to say that one of the problems was tactically, how do you shoot back and not kill an innocent person? And so there were tedious procedures to get permission to shoot. Like technically, if we were shot at, we would call a tactical operations center and saying, receiving fire, request permission to fire. And sometimes as much as 15 minutes, they would call a village chief and say, can we shoot at this area? And they would say yes or no. Anyway, in that amount of time, the people who'd shot were gone, or they'd gone in a tunnel or whatever, and anyway, there was no shooting them. So what we would do is, so we didn't get sucker shots taken at us, is that we would call a tactical operating center, we'd say receiving friendly fire, returning same, which means we had immediately shot back. And nobody ever said, oh, bad Pete, you know, here you were shooting out there. And we were in generally speaking at night in what were called free fire zones, which meant if anybody was out there moving, you were taking your life in your own hands, because these people were tremendous fighters. They would try and throw hand grenades in the boats while we were in the boat with the hand grenade coming at us, called satchel charges. Cue me again. Where?
We were talking about friend or foe.
Oh yeah. So we would just go back and start shooting immediately. I mean, the sooner we could return fire, the better, was my thought. And I told the guy, I said, we're not doing this bullshit of calling, get permission to fire. We're firing, and we'll ask questions later. Well, nobody ever questioned what we did.
Do you remember the first time that you came into close contact with the enemy?
Yeah, I was down. Believe it or not, you could get below this level if you weren't standing up here like John Wayne. You could get low and we had ceramic armor and ballistic blankets hung inside these boats that protected us. And you could get down and shoot a machine gun. I mean, you might get your hand blown off, but you could shoot safely from the boat. And keep in mind, we're low. I mean, these machine guns were like this high off the water line. Mm-hmm. About like that. So
when you first encountered the enemy, how did you feel?
I was stunned and frightened. That suddenly we'd done all this training and we had all these things, that here actually was somebody who had the nerve to shoot at us. I mean, that took a huge amount of courage on their part, because they knew it was going to be very quickly returned. Mm-hmm. So I was surprised. And other times, you couldn't tell you were being shot at it. South Vietnam, when I was in country, a day did not pass that I didn't hear an explosion of some sort. An AK-47, which is their standard shoulder arm, or a hand grenade or something going off. So explosions were commonplace. And there were people who were snipers who were shooting at you, and you didn't know they were shooting. They had silencers on their guns, and you couldn't even hear it. But maybe a bullet would skip up around you, or somebody would see a tracer coming in the air and tell you that you were being shot at. I mean, many times you did not know it. And these boats, if we were running like this, we made a lot of noise, and we couldn't hear it shooting. We just had no idea at all. When we were in an ambush site, and whenever everything was shut down, you could hear it. Then you could hear a pin drop. But the first time we said, "My God, we really better watch our P's and Q's here, because if we are the slightest bit negligent in what we are exposing, we're going to die. And this is no place to die."
Well, and also the boats were a new equipment for the Navy at that time.
Yes.
Right? So,
oh, yeah.
So you were kind of charting new waters.
Yeah, and there was nobody saying, you shouldn't have done that. We were in charge. There were 4 Lieutenant JGs, of which I was one. And there were, the next level down in management are Navy chiefs. They're enlisted, but they're very senior, E7s and 8s and 9s. And so we had the actual say of when we shot and didn't shoot. We had a couple of guys who might have been psychopaths. I don't know, but who would, if we got in a situation where we were in contact with the enemy, might of their own accord say shoot, or just start shooting a machine gun, and we'd have to. We got those guys transferred out, but it did happen. They liked the idea of shooting. They liked the idea of killing somebody. That it was this kind of duty attracted them, and it attracted me because it was the wildest thing I'd ever done in my life. I mean, imagine turning 20 at this point 24-year-olds loose with this kind of equipment. I mean, it's like driving down Broad Street in a tank. Is very, very much what it's like. It's unstoppable force, almost unstoppable. I mean, you can stop a tank and you can stop one of these if you have the nerve to shoot a rocket in it, but it takes a lot of nerve to try and stand up to it.
I have a question about the racial relationships within these boats, because I assume when you were on the Hancock, it's very much like officers are messing by themselves. You're not working with enlisted. I mean, you're working with them, but you're not socializing, or your off time isn't.
That is right.
It's very stratified.
Very much so. Like on the aircraft carrier, where up in the forecastle where I had as a junior officer, it was called officers' country. And unless, as an enlisted man, you had a distinct reason, you did not go up there. And likewise, we did not go traipsing around the bunk rooms where the guys were living out their daily lives. I mean, we very much maintained those separations, and I think it was crucial. Here, we were all together. I was saying sometime earlier that we would go out, and if it rained, we just got wet. But typically, we would never go out for more than 3 nights. So if we were out for 3 nights, we knew at the beginning of the 3rd morning, we're going to get to go back to 1 of 2 places: a ship, and then we had one called the Benoit, which is a berthing ship, which provided really good shower. We had hot showers, we had medical, we had helos, we had everything. Or a thing called a YRBM, a yard berthing barge that was unpowered. The Benoit had power, and it could go on its own about 12, 15 knots. The other things, the YRBMs were basically like the Benoit. They had a helo deck on them, medical, and all kinds of repair facilities. And we even had on both of the ship and the YRBM a typical Navy setup. We had white tablecloths. So we went from using a 10-gallon bucket as a toilet back to a ship like a cruise ship. I mean, the change was dramatic.
Yeah.
But it was up to Navy standards. Food was good. It was we had these mess bills, which were a joke. I never paid anything for food. Supposedly it was deducted from our pay. I don't know.
Don't know where that came
the food was always there.
But on the boat, you had people you had black men serving with you.
Oh, yes. Well, we had our senior chief, Chief Jones, was black. I think we had about 100 people involved in the whole operation. I'm guessing there were I can think of 4 blacks who were outstanding sailors.
They were all enlisted?
They were all enlisted. I only, in my Navy career of active duty, I was only around one black officer, and that was the guy who was the weatherman aboard the Hancock. And he outranked me. He was a full lieutenant. Foster was his name, terrific guy and a terrific officer. But I was only around one black officer in my whole career. That's all changed.
Yeah.
There were, I think, everybody had to volunteer for this duty. And unless a guy made a mistake, they were happy to be where they were. And most of them were either gunner's mates or enginemen, that meaning they were rated and knew a skill, which we needed. There was also a line handler and a boat captain on each boat. And so they were fairly senior as a group. We had a couple of guys who it turned out were not suited. And we got them medically relieved. Mm-hmm. We got them out of there. Because if they failed to do something, they could cause others to get hurt.
So where you were doing your operations at the time, was there a strong Viet Cong presence there? And did you feel that you were making progress?
Yeah. I mean, we were messing up their supply system. Again, they were supplying men and ammo to the guys down in the south, and the southern guys were stealing food from the farmers and shipping it north. It's called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So we were at the southern terminus of the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
How were you feeling about the war when you went in 68, or when you started actually serving in 68 and then on active duty, and then when you headed there in 69? I know that you said that, Nixon's getting elected and he's doing troop drawdown, but is the feeling that the country is kind of losing steam, the United States is losing steam?
I tell you, the country was a mess, and the anti-war people were powerful. And I mean, they firmly believed that they were right. And then there were the people who were fighting it. I knew that I would rather be doing that than protesting. That's I guess, a way to say it. But there were a lot of my contemporaries who were violently anti-war and did all sorts of things to, like, get a strange result on a test to cause it was called becoming 4F for the draft, and doing everything they could possibly do to avoid it.
Do you feel that you were making progress when you were...
Hard to measure, because you cross the line between, I'm glad you asked that, because what we wanted to do was make sure we did not get hurt.
Right.
Screw everything. And we didn't care what Kissinger said. We didn't care what Johnson said. We didn't give a damn. We were worried about one another and not getting killed. And yet at the same time, doing our job. Mm-hmm. So you were on the prongs of a dilemma. The young men who chose to go to Canada were kind of gutless, or I thought they were. I don't know what John McCain thought either, or Paul Galani. But they kept their chins up in prison for nearly 7 years. I just can't get over it, what they did. This is a funny story. I was talking to somebody. I was a stockbroker here in Richmond for about 20 years, is what I really did to earn money. But I had a black client, and she was in City Hall. And somehow, I don't know how this happened, we got talking about Paul Galani. And she said, He must have not had a very good lawyer, leave him in prison all those 7 years. It was so stupid and so offensive that I didn't say anything, thank God. But I couldn't believe there was that level of detachment and total lack of understanding of what he was doing. But that actually happened to me. I thought, God damn. I just was stunned by the stupidity of the comment.
Yeah.
But she thought that, yeah, if you're a prisoner of war, you just needed a better lawyer to get you out of jail.
If only. If only it was that simple.
Were there any mechanical issues that you guys encountered in running these boats that, kind of frustrated you, or
No.
they were perfect?
They were perfect because we had 100% repair packages. That is, each one of these boats had 2 brand new 427 engines in them. We also shipped over in a parts supply package 2 brand new 427s for each boat. So we had 40 427s that were brand new that we could just, like, switch out. If one of them, we had some guys who were really good mechanics, and there was always a question about how much horsepower we had. Reason being is these engines were used in actually Chevelles and Corvettes, and anyway, the insurance company said, you guys at General Motors cannot put engines that are this powerful in these cars, because with a little tuning, they could go from, the Navy claimed they had 325 horsepower. Well, little tuning gave you 500 or 1,000 horsepower a boat. And the boats would go, if they were lighter, they would go faster. So towards the end, I mean, some of these boats I think would go, I know they'd go 50 miles an hour. And we didn't have any way of measuring. We didn't have any speedometers. A helo could come along with us and slow down and get a speed. But they were fast and they were powerful, and it was really kind of the unknown factor. And some of the guys were really good at tuning engines and getting good parts for them. So some boats had more power than the others, but they had a lot. And to answer your question is, if we needed a new part, we had a new part. So we never had boats down for long periods of time. Now, if we had not had 100% spares, we ran the engines hard, blew some of them up. So what? But we also had enough skill that we could rebuild an engine, too. And the boats had something that was really cool. We had gasoline bladders that were put in airplanes. They were self-sealing, so you could take a pistol and shoot one and it wouldn't explode. And it was gasoline. And as a matter of fact, it was 91 octane gasoline, which always led us to believe that they were, even though they were denied it, they were high performance engines. But the people from Mercury Kiefhofer cruiser said, burn 91 in these things, which is what the same octane that the helos burn. It was avgas. And the engines demanded, and they ran great. So we had the skill to do it, and we had the parts to do it. So it was never a matter of not having the stuff we needed to operate. That was really well executed.
Yeah, it seems like it was a really well thought out.
Yeah, it was.
Unit.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, all the supplies were to a place called Ben Tui, which was a base right on the Mekong River. The Mekong River is kind of like my hand as it gets down to the south. It's got 5 or 6 main channels, whereas if you're up in Cambodia, it's in a single channel. But it was a huge, vast area.
Did you ever run into any kind of wildlife? Like, what was your experience with the flora and fauna of Vietnam?
The answer was, I never saw anything wild in a natural setting. There were some big snakes, which I did not like at all, that were there, but I never saw them, with one exception. Somebody had a big snake that was under a set of stairways, and they put chicken wire in it. The snake was about this big around. And I don't know exactly, the base CO did not know they had it there. And I saw it, it was a fearsome looking beast, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And I don't know what happened to the snake.
So you're saying they're keeping it as a pet?
I think. I know, I mean, I just thought, God damn, not me, I want nothing to do with that snake. If you went up into Vietnam, into the jungle, we were where it was flat in the Plain of Reeds. If you went up north to I-Corps, there was tigers in the jungle and all sorts of interesting animals. Down where we were, not so much, because it was all been civilized by farming techniques. You would see water buffalo, but they were basically domesticated. They were big animals, and they used them to pull plows in the rice fields. I remember some well-meaning American government agency got a bunch of tractors sent to South Vietnam. Well, the tractors just sank in the mud. All they could use them for was to drive them around in circles over the rice to knock it out of its, and then pick it up, and in the wind it would winnow itself. But tractors were almost useless because it was so muddy. I mean, yeah, it was definitely muddy. Like this picture, I mean, how high would you say that bank is? 4 feet, maybe
Yeah.
5 feet, yeah. When it got lower than that, it wouldn't support, this was good too. The Viet Cong had tanks, but they could not run down here in the Mekong Delta. We knew that we were not going to go out and run into a tank, thank goodness. I had an experience in July of 1970 where we did a run 100 kilometers, 60 miles, up the Mekong towards Phnom Penh, which was in Cambodia. And as we started going upriver, suddenly banks became more pronounced. And when we got where we're going, the banks were like 10 feet high. And I had a SEAL team with us. And they were supposedly going out to do either a body snatch off of a village chief or to see if they could run into some tanks. So I think we had 4 stabs on this operation. And we ended up, I had an agreement with the SEAL, I'm not a SEAL, but with the SEAL CO. And it said, okay, we're going to take our flashlights with red lenses. And when you coming back on your op at whatever time it's going to be, flash 3 times, and I'll flash back 3 times, and we won't get into a gunfight with ourselves. So I said, okay, that's what we'll do. I remember taking some machine guns off and setting a perimeter up on the banks, and I was stunned at how high we were above the water, and I could just see a tank coming up, but I don't believe it could have taken its barrel down to where it could have shot at us. I think it would only go like about this down, but maybe way up here for if they were shooting 15 miles. Anyway, we were up there on ground that was thick enough to support a tank. And I was really glad to see the SEALs come back about 4 in the morning and get the hell out of there. Anyway, they didn't find a tank, and they didn't find a village chief. It was just a mission that we ran. But we had to run 60 miles. These boats would do it easily. They do it in about 2 hours, back down the Mekong down to South Vietnam.
Did you ever like fish off of the boat?
Water skied. And if there's, I'm a fisherman actually, but if there was fishing going on, I didn't notice. I don't think I had any fishermen. There's a famous smell of decomposing fish, mostly, for sauce. It's called Nook Mom. And you could smell a Nook Mom factory for 5 miles if the winds were right. But it was balls of decomposing fish, about like a bowling ball. I think I might have seen some monkeys, but they might have been pets. I don't know that I saw any monkeys in the jungle.
Did smelling that sauce make you not want to eat fish?
I like to eat fish.
Okay.
And if you go in like the Mekong restaurant, what they call Nook Mom is just high intensity kikkoman. It's a brown sauce. And the name of the beer, it's got Vietnamese beer. It's got 33 on the cans. Bami Ba is 33 in Vietnamese. That's about all I can remember from my Vietnamese language school. I knew how to order a beer.
Did you ever have a chance to use your language?
Not really, and I was embarrassingly improficient with it.
Well, I mean, it is a whole nother alphabet, and
Oh, but you know, they use the same letters, like an A looks like an A, whereas if you're looking at Chinese, there was a place in Saigon called, come on, Pete, well, anyway, when you got into it, the signage changed from characters for English writing to Chinese writing. And it was a place where the Chinese ruled the roost. In Saigon, it was like this separate community within a community.
an enclave.
An enclave, yeah. And they actually played Russian roulette in there. They really did it. It was called, I can't remember what it was called, but anyway, it was a special area in Saigon that the reason I know about it is I used a Chase Manhattan Saigon branch for a savings account. And it was right on the edge of this Chinese area.
So
Go
did
ahead.
you ever go on R&R when you were serving on the stab boats?
I did. Met my wife in Honolulu. It was great fun. It was terrific, yeah. We were all set up for it. We had a week you could go, and the U.S. government paid for my wife's flight from St. Louis to Honolulu, and I flew from Saigon to Honolulu. And we just had a grand time. We took one day, we went to an outlying island called Kauai, and it was so jungly that I wanted to get back to Honolulu, which we did. And we had a great place to stay. There was a thing called a Colony Surf Hotel, and I heard, we had an admiral aboard. Well, this is another story too. We had an admiral aboard. His name was Admiral Morrison. And I realized about halfway through the cruise that his son was the lead singer of the Doors, Jim Morrison. And they did not get along for shit. They were absolutely opposed. Anyway, I heard Admiral Morrison talking to another admiral and said, we were going to stay at the Colony Surf. I said, God damn it, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. So we stayed at the Colony Surf, just below Diamond Head in Hong Kong, Honolulu. Yeah, and it was fabulous. Had a great restaurant at the bottom of it.
So was it hard to go back to Vietnam after?
Yeah. You felt like, God, I haven't gotten hurt. I haven't gotten shot. You know, I haven't received some hideous injury that's going to affect the rest of my life, however long that may be. But I mean, there are a lot of guys got hurt. 60,000, I think, were killed is the rough number of all, but about 4 times that were hurt, wounded terribly, gut shot with a machine gun. I am grateful that didn't happen to me. I mean, everything is still hooks up and runs, and it would be terrible if it didn't. It would be horrible.
Yeah. So how long did you have to serve until the end of your active duty when you went to Honolulu? Was it like?
I was about halfway through. Yeah, I think it was in August, a little more than halfway through, and then I went back. At that point, we switched from a squadron to 2 divisions, so I had duties as a commanding officer when I went back, for which I'm pleased about, actually. And then in late October, the decision was made that we were going to bring the boats back to the United States, which we did. And, oh yes,
Design or?
no, damn, did I leave that in the car? I hoped I had, is there a little business card?
Oh,
Do you see one? These boats were brought back to the United States. Some of them were sunk for various reasons, but a couple of them were not. One has been bought and put in a museum in Du Bois, Wyoming, called the Military Museum of Transportation. Let me see if I, anyway, there is a stab boat. There's one left in a museum in Wyoming.
It's the only one left?
Supposedly, there's another one somewhere. I haven't seen it, but this is one that I knew it was in existence. And we had kind of this is kind of cruel to say, but the guy was kind of a camp follower. He was not a Navy guy at all. He was Army, but he became interested in it, and he bought a couple of stab boats and kept them all these years. And I got him to sell one to the Museum of Military Transportation, I think it's called.
I can find it.
Surely I have it. Well, I'll call you back. Just with the information on it. But one of these boats does exist. It looks just like, it doesn't have any engines in it. One of the differences about this boat, and there's a boat called an LSSC, a light seal support craft, is that they had jacuzzi outdrives like a water park. Mm-hmm. These boats did not. We had propellers on them, the biggest ones that were made for houseboats to harness. We had a little more powerful engines, and so ours actually had props down in the water, and they sat down about 2.5 feet under the boat. But it gave us instant acceleration also.
But do you know why the Navy discontinued the use of these boats? Was it just because Vietnam as a conflict, it involved a river kind of?
I don't know why the decision was made to bring them back. It was a political decision for sure, and it was apparent that the war was headed towards winding down, and it was decided not because the Vietnamese people are smart as hell, that they could have maintained them easily, but for some reason they decided that everything that came from the U.S. had diesel engines in it. The Swift boats and the PBRs had Detroit diesel engines in them, and these were General Motors gas, and they just brought them back. I don't know anything about the timing of it. Oh, but what partially played, I guess, a role in it is that the standard tour in Vietnam was 1 year, and 1 year was rapidly coming up for the whole group.
Because you all.
Yeah. So what do? Do you train a whole new group to come over, and that would have taken a 6-month lead time? They would have had to have begun the training in July to have relieved us in late 1970. And I guess it was decided that they wouldn't do that. What if I put it in my pocket? Go ahead.
So, can you tell us about the board that's carved right
Yes,
there?
I can tell you.
Do you want?
Hand me that green book, the scrapbook. Thank you. My executive officer was a guy named Don Merkovich. And Don Merkovich was highly talented. And he grew up in Puget Sound as a fisherman. And he was really strong. And so here's a picture of Don, and he was also really artistic. And he was my number 2 man, my XO. So Don decides, and he does, to this day, does stuff like this, that he's got a couple of chisels that he borrowed from the Seabees, a pocket knife, and he gets a big chunk of wood that we brought in from the Seabees, and does a bas relief of our boat coming out on step, which is, it ends up looking like this, only this is a poor man's copy, but a copy nevertheless, the only one that exists. So here is Don working on it. Here's the 2 of us. Hold on, folks. And there he is again.
I remember there was an image of it.
There's another place in here. Come on,
What kind of camera did you have while you were in
a
Vietnam?
Nikon F.
And would you buy film at the base exchange?
Yeah, here it is. Here's a picture of him with the finished product. He used brown shoe polish to give it the color. So this is just strictly his own artistic ability.
Very impressive.
Yeah, it is. And this is in our office in a place called Knob A, which is down in the Rungsat Special Zone. We were working with Navy SEALs, doing inserts with them and escorting ships. And somewhere around here is a letter. One day one of the ships slowed down and gave us 6 cases of beer, which I thought that was really nice. And so I wrote him a letter thanking him, and I'll be damned if he didn't write me back. And that's around here somewhere. These guys here in khakis are our maintenance officers, and this was somewhat of a bone of contention. They were full lieutenants. They had been enlisted men, and they were at the end of their Navy career. And they really didn't like reporting to me because I was 1 rank less as a Lieutenant JG. They had railroad tracks where I just had 1 silver bar. They had 2 silvers. This guy here is Chief Haggerty. He was my leading chief, a wonderful guy. He was just terrific. He did all the liaison between me and the troops. And this is, what is this? Oh, this is one of our beer parties, as a matter of fact. And this guy here was a boxer. He was a light heavyweight champion of the Navy, and one of my fine black sailors, just superb guy. More of the party. This picture here is taken. This is a picture I've taken of Don, my XO, over the Rungsat Special Zone, a really wild and woolly area, kind of like the Everglades, where the river spread out all over the place, and it was full of Viet Cong. And we were at a base called Na Bay, and this is the base at Na Bay. We're cooking hamburgers there. More shots from the helo. This is in my office. And these are just both another really good black sailor, just tremendous. He's alive still, lives in Chicago.
Do you and your group still have reunions?
We do, every 2 years, and for some reason he will not come, and it makes me feel bad. I don't know why. Because he stays in contact with us all the time on email. He loves email, so we're in contact. Here we are moored in Na Bay, and this is towards the last of our career. We're making a run with all the 10 boats I have. We're headed back to a place called Dongtam where the LST is, and there's this huge crane, which is kind of covered up here. Well, here it shows it, that could lift the boats up to put them on a ship, which is exactly what happened.
And then they're on the barge?
Yeah, they're on the barge getting ready to get loaded on the ship.
When you guys went into Cambodia, you said you went to Cambodia for the Navy SEAL team, right?
Yeah.
How did you all feel about going to Cambodia since you weren't supposed to be in Cambodia?
You know, just another dangerous deal we did.
Did you feel like a sense of like, you were ordered to Cambodia, but I mean like in your daily like trying to patrol the canal, did you try to stay away from crossing any borders or?
We normally, yes. We normally stayed the hell out of Cambodia because this is where politics did play a part. There were different political rules for Cambodia. We also, without hesitation, if we thought there was a need, would go into Cambodia, which I did a couple of times. Cambodia was, well, they were supplying the North Vietnamese, the VC, with supplies too. We had one night, we were maybe 20 miles from the Cambodian line, and the tides were strong enough that they would literally turn the flow of the Mekong River around. And it was so flat, you couldn't tell what was upstream and what was down. And we had these barges, we saw some of them, that were basically clubs for the enlisted guys to get a beer. It was free. Well, a guy had too many beers. The whole barge got turned around. He jumped in his boat to go what he thought was downstream, back down to where he was staying. He ended up going due north and was arrested by the Cambodians, drunk, with a PBR. And my boss was a guy named Lieutenant Commander Ferguson, who was a wonderful officer and a genius at paperwork. I've never seen anything like it before or since. And so he made it so that I didn't have to do, and the other SEAL didn't have to do too much paperwork. We mostly were involved in operations. But we had a hell of a time getting him out of Cambodia. And he was held as a prisoner of war for a while. Here is my old boss right here. And here are the other young officers that I was with in Vietnam.
And then you won the Bronze Star? You were awarded the Bronze Star?
I did. Kind of don't talk about that because you might be sitting next to somebody who's won a Navy Cross, so
you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. The answer is yes, I did. And I'm pleased to have done it. And it was a nice reward, I guess you would say.
Was it a specific operation that you can talk about or no?
It was specifically, yes, there was a place called Phuc Xuyen that had something. I remember it was late in the afternoon, and the VC shot the hell out of Phuc Xuyen, and we had a base that was really close to it. And I went down in there, and we had a helicopter coming with a medevac. Somebody had gotten hit, and we counter reacted to the shooting and shut it down. And so that was involved in it, in that one specific instance. But it was, I am certainly not a Navy hero by a long shot. But that played a part in it, I'm sure.
Can you talk at all about the loss of the people to your unit?
I can talk about it. It was terrible. The only good thing about it is that I was not on duty when that happened. I was on one of my rotations out, and I am so glad, because I don't carry any. If I would have been out there, I would have felt guilty to this day. But I mean, you know, sons or husbands, or they were killed. Baker, Johns, and Crabtree were their name. I saw the results of it, and these guys were blown apart by rockets. We hauled the boat out and got it fixed up and running in a couple of weeks. But these guys were killed outright, instantly. And I remember being shocked by it, because it was brutal, the way they got hit. And I think a lot of time has passed, well, 53 years, that they must have not paid attention to what was going on an opposite bank from them. I think maybe that they heard somebody, but they weren't sure. It's like when I ran out to drink their apple juice. They should have gotten the hell out of there. I mean, it was never worth losing their lives. Absolutely not. I was kind of involved in the aftermath. As an example, I had to do this duty. They had lockers, and we took some bolt cutters and cut the padlocks off, and we sent their stuff back to their families. And so that was I had that duty of helping out. And a couple of them, or one of them, had a girlfriend, and we tore those letters up. They never made it back. You know, we tried to be beneficial as much as possible.
Do you mean like girlfriend as in like in addition to
Yeah.
a wife?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Not
yeah.
like just you didn't
Yeah.
want his mother to have his girlfriend.
Well, that was okay. We do that. No, but we didn't want to get involved with the girlfriend and the wife. No, thank you.
Okay.
And so we stopped that.
But do you think that's like an understanding in the military, that when someone falls, a soldier falls, that when you're cleaning up what remains of their belongings, that you kind of censor for the family?
Well, yeah, and it's just a matter of common sense. Why send something like that back? Why incriminate the dead?
They have enough. They're dealing with enough.
Yeah, oh, hell yes. Yeah, you know, and we felt like, well, or I felt like well, I'll just leave it right where I found it. Thank you.
I mean, they may have found out.
I don't know. Not on my watch.
But I mean, like, if the girlfriend shows up at the funeral, then, you know, the family has to work that out.
They do, yeah. And Lieutenant J.G. Barnes is not there. So, all I was doing was trying to clean up the mess, you know.
Yeah. But it must have been a very sobering.
Oh, I mean, you're dealing with a young man who's dead, and who you saw just recently, like the day before. Terrible. I'm really sorry, those guys. I mean, I don't think about them every day, but I think about them. I didn't bring it down here, but my run-in mate, Dan Gorman, using the picture of the guys looking out with the binoculars. A guy named Courant did a nice poem about it, and I've got it framed. It's in my house, but I didn't bring it down here. But about how horrific it was. when we had right at 4% killed. I don't think anybody was wounded. People came damn close. This is kind of foggy in my memory, but I remember this, and that was usually I didn't stand up very much. And there was, on all the officers, we did not wear insignia because there was a price on our head. If we got shot by a sniper, I think somebody got $500. We got killed or shot. Where am I going with this?
You didn't stand a lot.
Oh yeah, thank you. So I was standing up, looking with the binoculars out at something, and it was dark. And the next day, right next to where I was standing, there was an ammo holder, and it was about as high as my hip, and it had a bullet hole right through it. So I missed getting shot by about a foot, and I'm probably in the groin. Hard to say. I don't know where the bullet went, but there was definitely a hole there, and it hadn't been there the day before. And nobody had a pocket knife making it, so, you know.
You literally dodged a bullet.
Yeah, literally, you know, goddamn, that was close. You know, that was, but I knew about it later. You know, I know that for a fact happened. You know, that was close. And there's another story that I'm not going to tell you. It's not appropriate, but it was when I almost got hurt too. But a lot of guys almost got hurt.
So as the time is coming to the end for your tour of duty, what are you're thinking about your career in the Navy and what you're going to do?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, do I want to go to, I come from a family of lawyers, and do I want to go to law school? Do I, you know, what in the hell can I do that would be anything that was remotely like this? And the answer is nothing. It's illegal. You know, I
Could have been a river pirate.
yeah, I guess, yeah. It's, there's a famous quote by Churchill that goes something like this, is, there's nothing as exhilarating as a young man being shot at without result. And once you've been there, you just can't quite get over it. I have suspicion that that affects you forever. It does me, for sure. I mean, it's like walking right up to the line and looking over and saying, "Oh, maybe I'll come back." The business of jerking the car back from almost running a stop sign or almost hitting somebody when you're not driving diligently. Same business.
Kind of like cheating death regularly.
Yeah. Hope I don't go out in the parking lot here and get shot by somebody, but.
So law school, it just didn't sound quite as exciting.
No, you know, I ended up going, but I'm not a lawyer. I never practiced, and I guess that I found a little more action in the stock market, so I ran an outfit called Quick and Riley here in Richmond. I did it for almost 20 years. It was a discount stockbroker. It had an office down in Shockoe Slope.
How did you end up in Richmond?
A job. I ended up here. I had gone to work in the brokerage business for a St. Louis company called Edward D. Jones, and we were broke, I'll tell you. And I did two things. I thought, and at this point, I had blown the Navy Reserve off. Stupid blunder on my part. And I was, this was probably August, I don't know when, maybe 1975. I said, you know, I don't have any money for Christmas. I could see bad things happening. So I cobbled together whatever I could of my Navy Reserve, my Navy, regular Navy, my blues, my uniform that I hadn't destroyed, and went over to the Reserve Center. At this point, I was in Kentucky, in Lexington, Kentucky, and walked in and said, I'd like to see the CO. Well, about 10 seconds passed, and I hear this, Barnes, get your ass back here. So I go down this hallway, and there is a guy that I had served on the Hancock with, who had made the reserves his career, named Harry Suchan. And he said, "Tell me what you have done." And so I told him. He said, "Well, this is the most effed up mess I have ever seen. However, it's you and me. So I can get you a pay billet today in the reserves, and I can get you a 2-week active duty in Port Hueneme, California." So I said, "Sign me up, Harry. Thanks. You saved my ass." So in 2 weeks, I found myself in Port Hueneme, and it was prophetic because there were about 6 of our boats that were still there, that it still existed. And here I was back with the boats again. I couldn't believe it. I never missed a lick because I was so gratified by what Harry had done that I went through 16 years straight of the reserves, which is what I should have done in the first place. It caused me, had I not done that, I would have been made captain. But here I have this about 4 years where I was great, get F grades, nothing happened, 0. I was just being a wise ass and paid the price. But actually not, it all worked out really well.
So
And
could you not, I don't understand of like, if you blow off the Navy Reserve, does that mean you're just not showing up for your duty?
that's what it meant, yes, it meant, I just literally, this is terrible.
And but they don't consider that AWOL, they don't go after.
No, because they knew where I was. I was not playing ball. I was not drilling on 1 weekend a month, and I wasn't doing anything. So when I was in law school, I thought I was going to become a great jurisprudence guy, and I was all wrong. And also, the timing of my miscreant duties were such that I still stayed with what was called my year group of officers. And so even though I was at the bottom of it, I was still in the regular promotion schedule, and it finally picked me up after the fact, because I thought maybe I was only going to make lieutenant commander out of it, or maybe only lieutenant, but I was going to get the 20 years in. I decided that was something to be very worthwhile, and oh, is it ever? I cannot tell you. It makes a huge difference to get 20 years in, good. Reserves or active duty, however you do it, it's the best second job on earth. I'll put it that way, especially if you enjoyed it, and then I had some really good times in the reserves. And there's a big reserve unit here in Richmond, which is where I wound up, down next to Defense General Supply Center. Okay. There's an Army Marine Corps Navy combined center down there. So that all worked great, really.
But you came to Richmond to be a staff.
I came to Richmond. I worked for Lloyd's of London. There was a guy. Do you all know downtown Richmond very well? Do you know where the Commonwealth Club is? Mm-hmm. Well, in the same block, there's a building immediately west with a blue door. It's unfortunately full of asbestos, but that was a Lloyd's of London correspondent, and I got a job working in that building because Francis and this is back to the no money. Our neighbor in Kentucky, where I was a broker, said, "Would you like to go down to Florida and see the Florida Keys?" I said, "God, yeah, I've never seen the Keys. Sure, I'd love to go." So we went down there, and I met the guy who owned the building next to the Commonwealth Club, and he offered me a job, and I took it and got to Richmond. Francis loves Richmond, and Richmond's been really good to me. I had to have about 1 million people to work a discount stock brokerage operation. I was just right at the minimum size to get it done, but it worked out well. Mm-hmm. And so I had a really good career. And then I'm about retired. I'm an arbitrator for the New York Stock Exchange. I hear disputes in 3 judge panels. But I haven't done one for a year. They can tell I'm getting old, but that's okay. So.
How did you feel when you returned to the United States after you had been serving? Like, did you feel welcomed back? Did you feel proud of your service?
Proud of my service, definitely. I didn't get anybody killed, which really tickled me to no end. I was pleased about that. I kind of knew that things would, and it's turned out to be true. You can't do that stuff and be legal. I mean, you're walking on the edge of disaster. I mean, where else do you know somebody who could run around with a real machine gun? You know,
On a fast boat.
yeah, on a fast boat, yeah. And taking the risk we took. Jesus, I mean, it was super dangerous. There is no question about it. I mean, I've never been any place where anybody shot at me since. I hope I never am. Hope I have enough sense to get down. If you look, I'm having lunch with a guy tomorrow who was an executive with Central Fidelity Bank, and I did some cashless option exercises for him in the brokerage business. And lo and behold, he reached the same conclusion that I did, that it would be smart to stay in their reserves. And he is a retired lieutenant colonel. And we touch base, we have lunch once a month just to kind of, check our flight path and see how we're doing, to stay in touch. But I mean, other than that, most of the people I run into here now, they don't know a damn thing about the Vietnam War, other than it was bad, and that 60,000 people were killed in it, who were U.S. citizens. It's 50 years ago. It's hard to believe. That's why I'm glad I'm doing this, is that there'll be some record of somebody who did it. And the Navy even had a far smaller presence than the Army or the Marine Corps. I don't know the numbers, but I do know that of the people in Vietnam who were actually in country, is the term, only about 10% of them were ever in any place seriously dangerous. Mostly they were in pretty big buildings in Saigon doing paperwork tasks for the military system. But the guys who were on the boats, we were on the leading edge. I mean, we were out there. There was nothing beyond us. We were it. And the only people who were going to help us were, our helicopter buddies or another boat. And we had the radios to back it up with. But I mean, it's as wild as a March hare. It was something that can't be done in civilized society.
But how did you feel your community received you when you returned?
Well, they might have thought I was a little nuts for having done it. But well, I mean, I was, I think now there is a begrudging of acceptance of the risk I took and the risk they did not take.
Among your peers?
Among my peers, yeah. And I see my peers regularly. Some I haven't talked about at all. But for 10 summers, I was a professional river guide in Jackson, Wyoming, on the Snake River. And I still see those guys. We fish together and communicate all the time. And most of them were not in the military in any way and are embarrassed about it. And I was talking to an uncle of mine, the Army uncle. He said that there were people in World War II who, for one reason or another, didn't serve, and they were hugely mortified by it, by their actions taken back in the 1940s. For some reason, they didn't serve.
Yeah.
And I guess they knew the reasons why. But they were certainly age ready. And the numbers are shockingly small for the people who actually served in Vietnam. And and all these people in the build-up to get there, along the way to finally put somebody in country. And we were it was kind of a mixed bag because it was kind of like magic. We flew there on a Boeing 707, and I left. I found the orders on Tonsanut. I remember reporting in there to no less than said to the civilian desk. I'd forgotten that, but we reported in, and we were wearing civilian. I'm not sure what I was wearing, but I think I had some civilian clothes. I put them on. And flew back to Anchorage and then to Travis Air Force Base in San Francisco. And then that was just it. There's a place between, you guys know this, between San Francisco and Oakland called Treasure Island. And I was mustered out of the Navy at Treasure Island and stayed in an out position until I got back in the reserves and did that. Mm-hmm. And that worked out well because the reserves were just 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year, which was the hard part of active duty. I used to go to the Pentagon mostly and did stuff that senior officers would do for a couple of weeks and kind of keep your hand in it. And I found that that was just about all the military that I wanted it, but not any more than that. That was plenty. And that was going to get me all 100% of the benefits. And did.
And your wife was teaching in St. Louis the whole time that you?
No, she was, at that point, she had quit working. Just doing her job, keeping body and soul together. And she's a really great cook, so we ate well and still do, for that matter. Yep.
Do you, how did you feel when you heard that Saigon fell?
I felt like it was inevitable, and it was just like the deal that we pulled with the poor Afghanistan people. The Afghanis had been left holding the sack, and we did it again with them. It was readily apparent that we had done what we could do in Vietnam, and I suppose economically we spin them into poverty. I mean, we did a huge amount of damage. My guess is that there are still a lot of fields that are not safe to walk in, rice paddies. I wouldn't go out and walk around those rice paddies after B-52 has put down all those bombs. God, no. But you know where it happened and how dangerous the country did. I read somewhere where Vietnam is the biggest manufacturer of coffee beans on earth. Now, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Give me the question again.
How you felt about the fall of Saigon?
I felt like it was inevitable. And they've kept it going now. This is 2024. So their system, is working, and now there are a fair amount of products that show up in this country that are made in Vietnam. And like my father wouldn't, I drive Hondas, he would have never bought a Japanese car, I can tell you. Yet I don't have any problem buying a Japanese car. And if there were a Vietnamese manufactured car that I liked, I think I'd buy it. They're clever people. The only thing I have I've got a ceramic elephant. It's about this tall. It was very much of a standard item that's a souvenir that GI's got, but that's my only remaining item that and you'd have to have a sharp eye to spot it in my house.
Have you ever thought about returning to Vietnam as a tourist?
I don't want to go as a shooter anymore. I don't have a burning desire to go. There are other places I would rather go. Indochina is a remarkable area of the world, and historically it's ancient. There's a great book called A Bright Shining Lie. You may have read it, and if you haven't and you have an interest, I'd recommend that one to you. It's the best written history I've ever seen. and a good explanation of the politics and how it all came in. And the other one is Bernard Fall's book, A Street Without Joy, is also a great one. And the Navy, to their credit, had me read A Street Without Joy while I was in school in Vallejo in my Vietnamese language school. I mean, I thought that was pretty damn liberal of them to read Fall's book about the fall of the French. Mm-hmm. There was a place on the southeast part of Vietnam called Vung Tau that I saw. It was the French Riviera of Vietnam, and it was a beautiful spot. And maybe I would, if I wanted to go back and eat some coconut and get the sense of the tropics, I would go to Vung Tau. And there's a lot of areas that I don't know the first damn thing about. We were I was so concerned about not getting killed, for personally and for the guys that I was in charge of. I mean, that was the overriding thought. Politically, I didn't know enough to make an intelligent decision about it anyway. It's either good or bad, and I came in on the good side. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't have done it. I guess I'd have gone to work. I never really considered that work, even though I got paid for it handsomely now, as it turns out. It was a very interesting time for the country. Very, very interesting. And I think those people, I haven't run into anybody who served who is anti-military. I mean, they're still pro-military. But I had a friend tell me that he ran into a gal, she said to him, for some reason, extemporaneously, she said, I protested the war. And his response was, well, I fought the war. He chose to do it and made the Marines a career. Retired as a colonel, actually, a shipmate of mine off the Hancock. So what time is it, ladies? Goodness gracious. 1:45.
So we could, we would like to ask,
I'm in good shape. I can go as long as you want.
do you have any questions on these?
I don't think so. We covered.
Did you have any lasting health issues that came out of serving in Vietnam?
Yeah. I was around Agent Orange. The reason I knew it was mostly when we were escorting ships in the Rung Sat Special Zone, is we would see these areas of jungle that were just brown, and you could look back and see 50 feet in it. And like right next to it, on a distinct edge, was green, and you couldn't see back 3 feet. And so you knew that was some bad stuff. I don't know that it came from there, but there is an irrebuttable presumption that it did, and that was I've had prostate cancer. Luckily, the medical care I've gotten at MCV has been terrific, and it's basically neutralized and gone. I don't think it exists in my body. I also.
But you didn't go through the VA. You went through.
I did go through the VA.
And the VA sent you to MCV.
Yeah, well, they're almost the same thing.
Okay.
The professorships intermingle and go back and forth between the VA and MCV. I did it for two reasons. I wanted to see what kind of care the guys were getting, and I went to the VA probably 20 years ago now, and it has been tremendous. And the latest thing is Congress passed a law saying that if you have high blood pressure, which I control with medication, that it presumptively came from Agent Orange. So for a while, I had 100% disability until I had stereotactic radiation, which killed the cancer. And now, for a reason I don't really understand, I am permanently 10% disabled. And I think I might become more because of the high blood pressure. For whatever it's worth, the wisdom of Congress said we think this is bad business.
And they should support the troops and the lasting effects of being at war.
Yeah, I mean, psychologically, I don't think I have any.
Like, you didn't have any trouble with, like, loud noises or anything that, would startle you because you were on such an alert?
The answer is, it's a qualified yes. I still have got pretty good peripheral vision, but I know what's going on around me probably to a level that I would not know if I hadn't been in the situation. Like being on the ship certainly wasn't lead to any of those. The biggest question there was, are we going to have ice cream for dessert? And as a matter of fact, if we had a particularly busy day, the chefs were so clever. We had, first time I ever had baked Alaska with cherries Jubilee, was on a ship, the Hancock. Yeah. Being around, I mean, the things that we did in Vietnam were terrible. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of really compromised Vietnamese people because of Agent Orange. I mean, they were living in it. I made a point not to, when I saw what was the brown stuff, I didn't get in it. Now, I was this close, but maybe that was too close. I guess it depends on the cycle of when it was poisoned and killed.
Mm-hmm. And the wind, maybe.
The wind, yeah, absolutely. That's right. That's right. And some of it was done at night, and maybe I didn't even know I was getting Agent Orange. I think I would have known it. I think I would have heard C-130s or Hueys that were putting this stuff down come over, but I don't know. All I know is that, like, there's a form that's called a DD-214. Have you ever heard that phrase? Mm-hmm. Well, that's a recapitulation of your service. It proves that you did it and where you were, and anyway. Mine says, it says, last duty station. And mine says Naval Support Activity, Saigon. Well, that is proof positive that I was an in-country sailor. Plus, I have all this other stuff that I've collected, like this. I think I was telling you yesterday or the day before. This sign was when we walked out of Na Bay. I knew that we weren't coming back, and I just reached up and grabbed that thing and said, "I'm going to take it with me. Someday will wish that I had done it." And I come from a family of collectors, so that's just one of those things that I collected.
And you have your boots. You brought your boots
Yeah.
from Vietnam.
There they are.
Do you have any? Those boots were from when you were in the stab unit.
That's exactly right. Those are combat boots from Vietnam.
Do you want me to bring them out?
I can grab it. Thank you, Ben. It's amazing how the condition is so good for 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, they're really good boots. They even have, the insole is still in there in good shape.
Wow.
But they were designed, these were totally designed for Vietnam. And the boot, I've seen some boots in the airports, guys wearing them who were coming back from wherever, from the Middle East. and they're kind of like this, but there are many layers of reinforcement. They dry right out. I just had these in my attic. And as a matter of fact, I have another pair. I've got 2 pair of them. But and because they've been in water and all over the place, they're totally broken in. They fit my feet exactly. And I've got, I didn't know if it was going to be appropriate or not, but I didn't go to the problem, but I've got some of my original uniforms it says, got a stab patch on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not exactly too sure where they are in the house, but I know I've got them somewhere.
Yeah.
But my guess is most of the guys, when they've wound up with Vietnam, they took these things and trash canned them and got as far away as they could from it. But they're really good boots.
Good tell.
Yeah. And they've hung together. It's remarkable.
Well, is there anything about Vietnam that we didn't ask you today that you wish we had asked you about?
No, I think you've been really thorough. The only thing I don't know that I've been clear enough with is the whole things. The whole thing is about the Strike Assault Boats, and they were really good for what we were doing. By that I mean, if we did not put the power on them, they were quiet. And we did that many times, like when we were setting up on an ambush site, there were several rules, one of which is you never use the same spot twice. Some guys did on PBRs and ran right into a submerged mine and got killed. Anyway, you could come into these boats and you could not hear them moving. The loudest thing, if we were going to set up an ambush site in an area, was the water kind of parting off the bow as we were going in. And so even if the Viet Cong saw us, most likely they did, once we got in the jungly area, they were not too damn sure where we were because they didn't know where we stopped. And I mean, it was a huge advantage. Whereas if we'd have been on a diesel-powered boat, it'd have been like hearing a Mack truck. Literally, the engines are the same, driving down and stopping. You say, well, there's the Mack truck. We know where he is. We don't know where the stab boat is, this guy. But they were really well designed. I think as I was telling you, they were so powerful that you had to watch. If you wanted to get out of some place, you had to start the engines, of course, and get the boat pointed the right direction. But then you had to come on the power gradually. If you did not do it, they would create an area of, it's called cavitation. Nothing but air. All the water is blown aside. And the engines will over rev without grabbing the water. So you've got to come out and get going about 5 miles an hour and then bring the power on. You can bring it on full at 5 miles an hour and the boat is just thrust out of the water. The stern just comes up like this. It rises about this much and there are straight pipes going to these big V8 engines and it sounds like a dragster taking off. But at that point, you don't care. You're getting the hell out of there. But I mean, they allowed us to probably escape getting shot because we could move so fast. The conditions for the sailors were not as good as a ship, according to Navy standards, but almost. And I remember I had some people tell me that who had been in combat situations, they say, if you get hurt, just tell yourself to hang on the best you can. If you can, and in Vietnam, it was a half an hour, you could get to a major surgery center. Or there was a huge field hospital in Saigon that we could get to within a half an hour on a helicopter pretty easily if we needed. I don't think it ever happened that we needed to move like that, but that was, it was nice knowing that, I'll put it that way.